World on brink of 5 disastrous climate tipping points, study finds. By the way, before I start, I wanted to just mention that I became aware of the fact that we were probably going to, we were headed for imminent human extinction. I gathered that back in 2013, and I had some sort of grieving stuff back then, so it's been on my mind since then, but also I've just although I continue to encourage people to go vegan, and I'm going to leave a couple of memes that I regularly share about the 119 countries, the largest study to date by Dr. Joseph Poore in the UK. That study has been out since 2018, 40,000 farms, from farm to fork, 90% of all we eat, and the conclusion was the single biggest thing one can do to address the climate crisis is to eat a plant-based diet, a diet free of dairy, eggs, fish, meat, etc. That's the conclusion of the largest study to date, and that was back in 2018. I regularly share that, ad nauseum really, and it's often met with a sort of silence at best, or people arguing with me, which I just don't even bother anymore. I just think if you can't accept the science on that, that's your problem, and if, one day you find that we have nothing to eat because agricultural systems have completely collapsed. And that includes, of course, way before the plants stop growing because there's too many great shifts in the climate. There won't be any grain or whatever rubbish they tend to feed animals in animal agriculture. There won't be anything like that to feed them. And there won't be any ability to exploit animals in pastures or in these awful industrialized farms, because it'll be way too hot, and at present sentient animals are standing in 50-degree heat and are just dropping dead from heat stroke. And you can imagine inside these industrialized farms, which even free range often is industrialized, they just scam people. It's all awful. There's no such thing as non-abusive use of animals. That can you imagine the temperatures in that? Mind you, when they wanted to get rid of animals during COVID because they couldn't get them to slaughter, they would introduce superheated steam into these industrialized facilities and kill all the pigs through superheated steam. So, this is the sort of outrageous, awful, monstrous system we have of exploiting non-human animals, that we do all sorts of horrific things to them and calling it animal welfare, and then killing them in horrific slaughterhouses. So that's my rave about veganism for now. I think about these animals every day, often during the day, and it's an unbearable thought to me what we're doing to non-human animals. And now our animal product consumption is coming back to bite us mightily by the fact that most people, or a lot of people anyway, don't seem to want to give up eating animal products. They would rather do that and go extinct and take every other non-human animal with them. That's the absurdity of it, that our taste buds trump our own survival. So think about that when you're having a cup of coffee or a cup of tea made on milk, or you're eating your breakfast of whatever it is, bacon and eggs, or sausages, or an omelette made of eggs. Think about what we're participating in through our everyday habits, 3 times a day or more, and that we can't seem to accept science because we like the taste of products that are completely unnecessary for our health and nutrition. In fact, they're killing us. At hundreds and thousands of people every year, hundreds and thousands are dying as a result of the ingestion of these toxic substances that are the result of violence, great violence. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about this. I'm not going to say much about these various disastrous tipping points, because you can see, and this has been, going on now I'd say over the last 20 years in particular, it's probably been too late anyway. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing things to mitigate the coming disaster, the catastrophe, but we should probably accept at this point that whatever these governments are going to do, it's going to be too little too late, and it was too little too late back in 2000. These governments knew about this. These politicians knew about this back in the 80s. It wasn't lack of science that was the problem. It was lack of political will. And those people back in the 80s are probably going to be dead when the worst of this comes about. And that is appalling, but that's the truth. And that's why people like Trump, Hillary Clinton, Biden, all those different US politicians, they don't particularly care what's going to happen to younger people on this planet. They don't even care what's going to happen to their grandchildren. That's the kind of psychopaths they are, because if they did care even about their own children and grandchildren, they would have done something decades ago. So we're run by psychopaths, and this is now where we're at. And as I said, in 2013, I finally woke up to the fact that there was no that whatever was going to be done in the coming years was not going to stop these feedback loops that now are presenting themselves, these positive feedback loops, where you get incredible heating, and then that melts ice, and then it sort of creates this sort of circular thing of more heating, and then more ice melting, and then methane escaping and carbon dioxide escaping, and then the Amazon rainforest starting to, a desertification starting to happen in the Amazon rainforest, all those, which is the lungs of the planet, all those different things start to happen, and exponentially it speeds up. And this is where we are. Now, I realize I'm not one for putting out hopium. I don't think that's a helpful thing for people to keep on saying to themselves, oh, we've only got 4 years or 5 years left now to do something. I don't think it's helpful to keep putting out this idea that things could be turned around in that 10-year period that the IPCC kept putting out. Remember, the IPCC is an incredibly conservative group, and so whatever they say, it's usually incredibly conservative, and I really don't think they've done any anything for the world to continue to put out these narratives, and then wait now until it's really, really crazy to then say we have so many years to turn it around, because that signpost passed a long time ago. Anyway, but we should always continue to push for renewables, to push for people to go vegan, firstly for the animals, because they're not our property, they're sentient, and they have a right to live without our interference. And the other reason, of course, is the climate crisis, to address zoonotic diseases. COVID is just one of many, many zoonotic diseases, that there'll be more and more of those, and some will be way deadlier than COVID. And there's a list as long as my arm of the reasons why we should be vegan. So don't let that go into some black hole or start finding excuses as to why you shouldn't do that. Think about sentient animals, just like the dogs and cats whom we live with, who love life just like we do and do not want to die, and then go vegan. Let's just find that truth in our minds. Put aside all your preconceived notions of animals and think of them in a new way, and also think about what we're doing. We collectively can each do something to address the climate crisis, even if corporations have thrown us under the bus. We can do something to address the climate crisis individually, each, and so much more. Okay, so let's read this. World on brink of 5 disastrous climate tipping points. Study finds giant ice sheets, ocean currents, and permafrost regions may already have passed point of irreversible change. Now, I wanted to point out that the East Siberian Arctic shelf is melting, and underneath that there is a huge amount of methane. And this has been melting now for at least the last, that I know of, at least the last decade. And permafrost is coming up. Methane is coming up from the ocean bed as well, due to the oceans warming. And so And even if 1% of what is under the East Siberian Arctic shelf came up, 1% methane, it would cause a tremendous rise in temperatures. So these are all things, I'm sorry, I know this sounds very dire, but, this is really how it is. And when I started talking about this in 2013, about the East Siberian Arctic shelf, to some it sounded very extreme what I was saying, that, was kind of pretty much all over for us, I was saying back then, but I outlaid some reasons. And I encouraged people to go vegan. Of course, hardly anybody responded to that. And that's not the only thing, of course, to do, but that is something we can do, and it's a major thing. So that was back in 2013, and people thought that was a bit extreme, what I was saying, but it wasn't at all. It was realistic. Anyway, the climate crisis has driven the world to the brink of multiple disastrous tipping points, according to a major study. It shows 5 dangerous tipping points may already have been passed due to the 1.1% of global heating caused by humanity to date. And by the way, look at what we're focusing on right now, the corporate media and all of that, about these ultra-rich billionaire, ultra-privileged billionaires who've appointed themselves as something special and rulers of, the UK and Australia and Canada and all of this, and colonized so many countries, stole wealth, are sitting on massive wealth. The Queen is worth was worth in 2017, and this is probably extremely conservative, 87 billion with a B dollars. That's what the Queen was worth in 2017, and yet she had the audacity to ask for the public to fund the refurbishment or something of Buckingham Palace at $7 million at one point, asking the public for money. These are the people that everybody's that people are wanting a public holiday for here in Australia on the 22nd of September. These are the people who they suddenly had to quickly install Charles III, because otherwise maybe people might start talking about what on earth is this irrelevant institution, and why are they how are they making the kind of money they're making? Whose wealth is that? Why are they in existence? And why are they asking the public for money? All those sort of questions, and expecting people who have been colonized and their populations murdered and their wealth stolen, expecting them to feel some sort of grief over someone who presided over those awful, invasions and colonizations. So, this is what we're fussing and obsessing about, while this sort of thing, what I'm talking about here, is happening. I mean, that is the sort of insanity. I don't know if this is some sort of a, where people become so, unconsciously, they're so stressed out about survival that they start obsessing about ridiculous, silly things. But also, of course, the corporate media don't want us to think about these kind of things, because capitalism is ecocidal, and they want to be able to continue to exploit the planet and exploit people until the end. So that's one reason why they'll find constant things to cause a drama over and hope that people don't pay attention to the real issues. And that's why we're probably going to go extinct, because that's exactly what's happening, sadly. So the climate crisis has driven the world to the brink of multiple disastrous tipping points, according to a major study. It shows 5 dangerous tipping points may already have been passed due to the 1.1% of global heating caused by humanity to date. These include the collapse of Greenland's ice cap, eventually producing a huge sea level rise, the collapse of a key current in the North Atlantic, disrupting rain upon which billions of people depend for food, and an abrupt melting of the carbon-rich permafrost. At 1.5 degrees of heating, the minimum rise now expected, 4 of the 5 tipping points move from being possible to likely, the analysis said. Also at 1.5 degrees Celsius, an additional 5 tipping points become possible, including changes to vast northern forests and the loss of almost all mountain glaciers. Now, that is a major, major thing. That's a really ding, 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 red flag, that everybody this should be all over the news. People should be completely freaking out and focused on this, because when the mountain glaciers are melted and these different ice caps melt, then this is basically the real beginning of the end. In total, the researchers found evidence for 16 tipping points, with the final 6 requiring global heating of at least 2 degrees Celsius to be triggered, according to the scientists' estimations. The tipping points would take effect on timescales varying from few years to centuries. I don't think it'll be centuries. I think it's sort of like, if you put a lid on a saucepan and you turn the heat on, and gradually, it'll very, very slowly warm up till eventually the steam underneath the lid starts to increase, and it just gets. And if you threw a few ice cubes in there, they would melt in no time. But it's sort of like it's an enclosed area, and the Earth, and it just gets warmer and warmer, and then it creates these tipping points as described in this. So I think this will happen faster and faster as time goes by, and it's unstoppable, really. It's literally runaway global warming. Quote, "The Earth may have left a safe climate state beyond 1 degrees global warming," end quote. The researchers concluded, with the whole of human civilization having developed in temperatures below this level. I love the way people just pretend like there's 99.9% of the planet's population doesn't exist, that being non-human. It's like they're completely irrelevant. They're sort of just something that we look at. They're entertainment for us, and it's all about humans. This is why, one of the main reasons too, why we are in this situation. Because if we ever had cared about non-human animals, first, we wouldn't have enslaved them and exploited and killed them, and we would have cared about the most of the population of the planet who are non-humans, and we would have included them in every decision we made on Earth, because we would have realized it's not just our species that is morally important, but that means we would have to have had a vegan position to be able to make those. We would have had to have seen that we're all interconnected, and that's something that capitalism doesn't foster, and it's something that we have this human supremacist idea that we are the most important species on the planet, and every other species can just get stuffed. That's really basically how it is. And that's why we are where we are, and that's why we're most likely going to go extinct. So our attitudes towards animals basically is eventually going to kill us, other animals, because we're an animal too. Okay, so I'm not pulling any punches here. I'm just telling it how it is, really. And I'm sorry if anybody's offended by that, but that's just how it is. Passing one tipping point is often likely to help trigger others, producing cascades. But this is still being studied and was not included, meaning the analysis may present the minimum danger. That's another red flag. People don't realize that this isn't sort of a linear thing. Professor John Rockstrom, and it'll be interesting to see if they mention anything about animal agriculture here, but they probably won't, or they'll just briefly brush over it. Professor John Rockstrom, the director of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, who was part of the study team, said, quote, "The world is heading towards 2 to 3 degrees of global warming. The risk of climate tipping points is rising rapidly as the world heats up. Estimated range of global heating needed to pass tipping point temperature." Now, I'll leave you to check this out. I'll leave a link in the description of this video, and you can check out the various tipping points here. All major things, even just one of them is like Greenland ice sheet collapse, West Antarctic ice sheet collapse, etc. All these individual ones are all major things. I won't read them all out. You can have a look. I mean, Arctic winter sea ice collapse, and these are all, see the temperatures there? And that, I think that's conservative. I think it's definitely going to go up 8 degrees and more. And you know what that will mean. This 1.1 degree target kind of thing, or 2 degrees, you know how it keeps creeping up at these COP things. They were always totally conservative and stuff. I don't know. Anyway, this sets Earth on course to cross multiple dangerous tipping points that will be disastrous for people across the world. There'll basically be major areas where people cannot exist anymore and animals cannot exist anymore because they'll be untenable for life. That's already almost here. There are places in the Middle East, in Western Asia, that are already becoming like that. I don't even want to think about if these places are still trying to do animal agriculture or have animals in facilities. I don't even want to think about that because I have a feeling they probably do. And that would be just so appalling. But this is the nature of it. As I said, there's no such thing as non-abusive use of animals. And it's even more true now that the planet is heating up and people still continue. And this is because we're not vegan. We're creating demand for these animal products. And so these animals are out in these fields baking to death, or baking to death literally inside these facilities as well. I mean, it's so appalling. And yet we get so upset if somebody's abusive to an animal in front of us. We'll step in often to stop that abuse from happening. And yet we're allowing this tremendous, widespread, horrific torture of non-human animals for totally trivial reasons. I mean, honestly, I'm so ashamed to be human, really. And this species of ours is just so appalling to be continuing to do this to sentient animals. Dr. David Armstrong Mackay at the University of Exeter, a lead author of the study, said, "It's really worrying." It's really worrying. That's an understatement. There are grounds for grief, but there are also still grounds for hope. Really? Okay. If you say so. Quote, "The study really underpins why the Paris Agreement goal of 1.5 degrees is so important and must be fought for." Oh, Jesus. Okay. Listen to this namby-pamby. Quote, "We're not saying that because we're probably going to hit some tipping points. Everything is lost and it's game over. Every fraction of a degree that we stop beyond 1.5 degrees reduces the likelihood of hitting more tipping points," end quote. That's true, but, this is like way, way, way too late. Recent research has shown signs of destabilization in the Amazon rainforest. Actually, the Amazon rainforest at this point is actually putting out CO2 now. Instead of absorbing it, it's the lungs of the planet, and now it's putting out CO2. That was already happening. And by the way, animal agriculture in the Amazon rainforest is clearing 5.2 acres every minute to make way. Well, basically, people are clearing 5.2 acres every minute for animal agriculture and for soy to feed animals in animal agriculture. So that's 5.2 acres every minute. Where do you see that being talked about? Okay, so recent research has shown signs of destabilization in the Amazon rainforest, the loss of which would have profound implications for the global climate and biodiversity, as well as the Greenland ice sheet and the Gulf Stream currents that scientists call the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, AMOC. So I don't know, are they going to mention anything about animal agriculture being the major driver for the destruction of the Amazon rainforest? Of course not. Why would we mention that? A recent report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said the risk of triggering climate tipping points becomes high with 2 degrees of global heating. The analysis, published in the journal Science, assessed more than 200 previous studies on past tipping points, climate observations, and modeling studies. A tipping point is when a temperature threshold is passed, leading to unstoppable change in a climate system, even if global heating ends. The 9 global tipping points identified are the collapse of the Greenland, West Antarctic and 2 parts of the East Antarctic ice sheets, the partial and total collapse of the AMOC, Amazon dieback, permafrost collapse, and winter ice sea loss in the Arctic. The assessment of the Amazon tipping point did not include the effects of deforestation. Quote, "The combination of the warming and the deforestation could bring that a lot sooner," end quote, said Armstrong Mackay. A further 7 tipping points would have severe regional effects including the die-off of the tropical coral reefs and changes to the West African monsoon. Other potential tipping points still being studied include the loss of oxygen, ocean oxygen, and major shifts in the Indian summer monsoon. The loss of ocean oxygen, well, that sounds very dire, and of course that would mean that lots of aquatic animals will die. And there's already been a prediction many, many years ago by scientists that the oceans would be empty by 2048. And that was due to our non-veganism because of fishing, but this is also due to our non-veganism, the loss of ocean oxygen because of the heating of the increasing heating of the oceans. Also, animal agriculture creating dead zones in the oceans due to fertilizers and all that kind of stuff. There's so many, if you looked into it, if people were honest with themselves and looked into the effects of animal agriculture, now I know I'm focusing on that in particular. There are other things, of course, that are major drivers of the climate crisis, but this is a major driver, and it's something we do have control over, and it means so much more than just addressing the climate crisis. The most important thing being addressing our violence towards other animals, but also zoonotic diseases, which are becoming more and more pronounced. There's going to be more and more of them, and they're going to be more and more deadly, and that they are zoonotic diseases because we're exploiting animals, and so these diseases are passing on to humans. COVID is one of them. So, there are so many reasons to be vegan, and let's not wait until others around us, wait until everybody's become vegan before we could become vegan, because that's not going to happen. If we wait for others to do it before we do it, then nobody's going to do it. So the loss of ocean oxygen, that is incredibly sad. And all those other things. The scientists define crossing a tipping point as, quote, possible, end quote, when its minimum temperature threshold is passed and likely beyond the central threshold estimate. Professor Nicholas Bors at the Technical University of Munich said, quote, the review is a timely update on the Earth's potential tipping elements, and the threat of tipping elements under further warming is real, end quote. He added that much more research was needed to narrow down the critical temperature thresholds, with current estimates remaining highly uncertain. Professor Thomas Stocker at the University of Bern said, quote, the science on tipping points is far from done. It has barely begun, and much better models are needed to address the question of what warming level is critical for which tipping point, end quote. And what's happened in Pakistan, where a lot of the country now is underwater, and that's going to become more and more prevalent, more and more common. And if it's not that, it's going to be no rain at all, and tremendous wet bulb moments where it's unsustainable for life. It's so sad, and it was so avoidable. All of this could have been avoided, and that's what's so tragic about it. Just like war can be avoided, this could have been avoided too. I think we have an inbuilt kind of a greed and selfishness in us, and unfortunately, the most selfish of us, the most greedy ones, end up floating to the top like that brown substance. And they end up running the show. They end up calling the shots for everybody. And that's how we wind it up here as well. But then there are people that are voting for them as well. And there's people that have been apathetic and just let it happen. So, we're all responsible really for this situation in one way or another. A special IPC, and if you hear any little moanings in the background, that's our older cat, Swifty, who's snoring. A special IPCC report on the climate tipping points was proposed in May by the Swiss government. Professor Tim Lenton of the University of Exeter, a co-author of the analysis, said, quote, since I first assessed tipping points in 2008, the list has grown and our assessment of the risk they pose has increased dramatically. Quote, our new work provides compelling evidence that the world must radically accelerate decarbonizing the economy. To achieve that, we need to trigger positive social tipping points, end quote. So that's the end of that. Positive social tipping points. I wonder what that means. Does that mean going vegan? Probably not. Anyway, so that was a happy little article to read. Not that this is by Damien Carrington, environmental editor. I wonder if Damien Carrington is vegan. Probably not. See, this is the thing. there's no point in wringing one's hands about the climate collapse and about imminent human extinction and, about other animals dying and going extinct if we're not vegan. There really isn't. It's sort of like, it's hypocritical to say the least, and it's also, it just shows our level of denial and our level of wanting little tiny pleasures that are completely unnecessary and just putting off and thinking that, this is going to happen down the track, and so I can continue eating my sausages and eggs in the morning and my steak in the evening, and I can continue having my dairy lattes and my this and that, and I'll just wait for when it looks like everybody's becoming vegan, and then maybe I'll do it too, maybe I'll just cut back, that sort of thing. That is an attitude that's actually killing us and killing other animals. Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope that you will check out my vegan resource, howtogovegan.org. I made it in 2016, and it's a podcast, a comprehensive vegan resource podcast. So go and check that out, and thanks for listening. Till next time. Bye for now.